Thank you for your interest in the QMS database. This is an Access application, and you'll see it here on your desktop. This system can be networked across your computer network. It will prompt you for a password. You get a splash screen that tells you what it is that you're looking at. And then the database opens up with the dashboard. For the first-time user, the first thing that you would want to do is to set up the database. And you would place your name here, address, and attach your logo. What that does is populate your name and logo throughout the database. There's a Nag Me button. This button is there so that you can make a choice. When the database opens, would you like to see a series of reports to tell you what's coming due or not? And so that is your choice, and you make that selection here. If you decide not to open up all of the database reports, as I've done in this example, then you can run them by selecting one of these two buttons, either a quick overview of the database or run past due reports, which runs a series of tables and reports to show you what's coming due in terms of training and corrective actions and non-conformances, management review, and so forth. So that's what is in the past due reports. I think there are 9 in total. So the first thing that you're going to want to do to set up is to populate your resources, which are human resources. And this is password protected because we are talking about employee data. So we're going to add an employee, put the first name, last name, employee number, department, position, job description. If you don't have job descriptions, then you can create one. And the way you would do that is simply click on the job description button. You could create a job description here. Then it will become a drop down on the form, and you would select that position, put in the education, skills, experience, and training, date of hire information, and that defines your employee. Also, you may want to note whether they are a U.S. person or not. That's important if you have 22 CFR, the ITAR requirements. And then in this lower section, define what this individual can do within the database. If you check a box, let's say as an example, this person is an internal auditor. When we set up the audit schedule and the audit results, then their name will appear as a selection choice. If you don't check the box, then they're not a choice. So you'll have to keep this current in order to utilize them throughout the database. The other input screens have to do with training. Some employees are selected trainers, have certain certifications. I won't go into all of that detail just to keep this video as brief as possible. The bottom segment is reports. So these reports correspond, of course, to employees and resources. There is a help section here to give you some help as you go along. As you're moving through the database, anytime you mouse over a open field, then you'll get a little pop-up as to what's expected to go there. If you don't get the pop-up, then you'll find that there are drop-downs to help you make the selection. So we're trying to make the database as user-friendly as possible, and you don't have to be an AS or ISO expert in order to use it. After your resources are in place, then you want to define your processes. This is a requirement of both ISO and the AS standards. You define your processes, you give it a name, whether it's sales or purchasing or design or manufacturing, production, whatever you call it, what it relates to, whether it's the QMS, and in this case there's some choices for EMS, the Environmental Management System, and if you're not concerned with that, don't worry about it. This is the QMS, Quality Management System. You'll fill in the description of the activities, the inputs, the outputs of these processes, objective of the process, who owns it, which is from the employees that you've entered, any documentation that may be related, and I'll show you that in a moment, notes about the process, how do you know the process is effective, any statutory regulatory requirements that may apply, standards in the paragraphs in the standard, any departments that are associated, the location. Some companies may have multiple buildings or segment the building into different locations. Some companies will just say front office, or they'll say shop, or they'll say maintenance. Any risk related to this process, any statutory regulatory requirements, you may make some notations here. You do this for each of your processes in order to meet the Section 4 requirements of the standard. Then you have reports that come out that relate to it. And if you want to build a turtle diagram, the system will do that for you. And again, there's help information as you go. This business context, this is a requirement of the new ISO and AS standards. And so this is a place where you can put that information in. There's some help to guide you along the way to fill this in. Resources we spoke of. Risk analysis. Risk analysis comes in 3 flavors. I'm going to talk about one as an example. Here, you'll put in what the risk is, the risk of being late on a delivery. What does it relate to? On-time delivery and customer satisfaction. Some notes, you might have some issues related to purchasing and long lead time suppliers. And then you will score for severity, occurrence, and detectability. This is kind of just typical FMEA style. There's criteria, and the database will calculate an RPN number. If your RPN number is a yellow, and certainly if it's red, then you're going to want to take action. And you would open a form, which is a PDCA form, which guides you through mitigating action documentation. Once you've done that, then based on the mitigation, you'll rescore the risk and hopefully get a lower score and end up in the green. If so, then that risk is accepted, and you note who it's accepted by, note the evaluation is complete, and the date that it's completed. There's some help along the way for risk, and there are reports related to risk. So as an example, it looks something like this, and so you see that it's color-coded, and this list would be as long as need be to collect all the, to display all the data that you've inputted. Customer information. This is at your option, but if you want to have your customer names as a drop-down, or at some point you might want to export the data for mail merge or creating labels, you can do that from this section. The document control section allows you to take your documents, whether they be in Word or Excel or PowerPoint, PDF. They can be attached here into the database, or they can be hyperlinked onto your network. You would note the name of the document, its revision, date of release, its status, whether it's current or obsolete. The data was obsolete, then if it's obsolete, you're not going to put it in the database. But when it becomes obsolete, you're going to change its status to obsolete, note the date, pick the process owner, pick the individual who approved it, how it's distributed, what type of document is it, whether it's internal or external, what does it relate to, any notes about this document, attach the document if you choose, any information about the changes, and this section here just populates a list so that you can later hyperlink onto it. Just by selecting it, you can get right to that document. These are reports about the documents that you have in the system. And again, there's a help section. If you need to create some documents, you're not sure how, there are some templates. These templates are based on prior revisions of ISO and AS, and they are meant as a basic template only. It's just to get you past that 80% typing and format. You do need to edit these and make them your own. They are not standalone ready to go. If you need a document, you need to write it to fit your organization. This is just a starting point for you, but there are a number of documents available here. some of those documents. Stamp control is pretty straightforward. If you use a stamp system, then you're going to fill out this bit of the database. You can attach an image of the stamp or the individual's initials or both, and create reports related to it. Tool control and fixture control is very similar, especially if you have government fixtures and government tools, then it's very important to have some traceability on tools and fixtures. Calibration is set up in 3 ways. The standard sort of calibration that I think we all think about. Standardization is when you verify a tool's accuracy prior to use. And gauge tracking is when you take a gauge and you loan it out to an employee or to a supplier and you want to make sure you get it back. Then this is a tracking system for that. Calibration in its traditional sense, you start off by noting all of your gauge assets. So all of your gauges would be entered into this screen, and then you would select which device you want to work with. You'd open up calibration activities, and you would put the information into the database, whether it got calibrated or got removed or got issued, whatever may have happened to it. If you're doing the calibration in-house, then you would open up the form and you perform the calibration. The deviations are calculated for you. It gives you a little notation if you go somewhat out of calibration. There's help information here. You can export the numeric data to Excel if you're doing gauge R&R work. And this is just reminding me to update the status on the calibration activity page, because I may change the status of this gauge after the work that I've just done. And you can also put out reports based on calibration. If you want to know what calibration is coming due in 30 days, then you would click a button and you would open up a report. And you could also open up an email, then send this report if it was going to maybe an outside vendor or somebody you could. The next section here has to do with orders and shipping. And the reason why this section is here is because the database will cover all requirements of the AS9100 and the ISO9001 2015. So in order to meet that claim, we have to be able to track on-time delivery. So on-time delivery means that we would have to track what the order is and when it's due, and we also have to show records of the results of review. So the database is set up to collect that information related to risk, product requirements, issues to be resolved with the customer, any special requirements, statutory regulatory requirements, terms of sale, and who reviewed the order, who approved the order, and the date. And once the information is in place, then there is a shipping log. From the shipping log, you would note the information that shipped, related to the order, and if there is any past due quantity or past due date. And from that information, and you can also access that log this way, from that information, then you can open a open orders report and get an on-time report. If you have design requirements, and many companies that I deal with do not, but if you have design, then the system is set up around the requirements of AS9100, where you're defining your design stages, creating design plans, and then for specific projects, of course, you're setting up your design inputs, your outputs, recording your reviews, design verification, validation, and managing any design changes. And then once again, you have your reports that come out of design. From purchasing, purchasing is rather a large section because we have suppliers that we are adding, supplier surveys that we're performing, supplier information that we're flowing down, and specifically this is AS9100 8.4.3 items A through M, and then when the item is received, they're receiving inspection. This section again are reports, so we can look at supplier on time, supplier defect report, there's a perishable report, and then that same sort of data is cut up a number of ways. Because this is access and it's unlocked, you can create any sort of report that you want, and you can modify it. I'll help you modify it. There's for the most part, there's no additional charge for that sort of stuff, or you can do it yourself. But let me skip over to receiving inspection for a moment. It's pretty straightforward. You'll note the purchase order number, the supplier name, the item received, what documentation did you receive, the date received, the due date, quantity received, accepted, rejected, an NCR number. You can copy the data to an NCR, note whether the item is accepted or rejected and who inspected it, and you can print a receiving label. If it is a perishable item, then you would note that and its expiration date. For traceability purposes, you note lot number, heat number, batch number, serial number, job number, any special information related to it, and you could attach those certifications. In AS9100 842, it talks about how will you plan for risky suppliers, and what actions will you take. And to do that, a control plan is created, and so there is a listing of control plans, and so now we have a method to define based on risk what actions will be taken. That is set up here when we are working with our supplier evaluation, reevaluation, and we select what actions we're going to take here under this control plan section, and then that becomes part of that report. And so receiving inspection knows what to do with a particular item from a particular supplier. And then once again, these are all the reports that are set up. There are help instructions to go along the way. There's information on counterfeit parts, which is typically 814 requirements for purchasing, and so there's some information there as well. Inspection, you saw a part of it there in receiving inspection, but we also have the AS9100 forms, first article forms, first article reports, and delegation, waiver request form, and then reports that come out of this segment of data, including a shelf life report. Again, there's some help information. Nonconformance. This starts with a nonconformance form. If you choose to have defect codes, you can do that. The nonconformance form is typical. That is, it starts with a nonconformance number that's auto-created, an open date, originator, customer, part number, revision, RMA number if that's appropriate, part name, lot size, sample size, quantity defective, quantity good, just a description, serial numbers, disposition, instructions for reinspection and retesting, cost, because there is a cost of quality segment of the database, who approved it, and then also there's the source of the nonconformance. What does it relate to? The department, the operation, the supplier name, defect code if you're using that, containment actions. This is AS9100 Rev C item E in 8.3, and it's now AS9100 Rev D 8.7 requirement, having to do if they're with an analysis of other product and process that could be affected by this particular nonconformance, and then the status of the nonconformance. And then we have various reports that go along with it, including the option to email that NCR out, possibly to a supplier and so forth. This is RMA tracking, safety incident management review. Management review starts off with the required inputs and outputs. So it follows along with the ISO and AS requirements. There's a communication log that says it's not a requirement. However, it might be advantageous to use the log to track and report on various meetings. There's a SWOT analysis. If you are following the AS9100 and it talks about strengths and opportunities, this takes it just a little bit further and asks you to go through and do a SWOT analysis. Now you see it spelled with 2 T's, and some people say, hey, you misspelled it. No, it's not misspelled. This is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and trends. And you'll see in this section of the standard in 9.3, it talks about trends. So the latest craze in SWOT world is talking about trends. Customer feedback divided into 2 flavors, ad hoc feedback and a survey. And so that segment is included. Internal audits, which can be a big deal, starts with a schedule, the audit areas, audit results, and an area where you can create a checklist by process, and you can manage the questions, create a checklist, edit the question list. There's already 420 or so questions there, and so you can use those, change those, add to those for yourself. And you can also, of course, you can create your audit schedule there, and there's some help. And creating the checklist, there was some more help section here also. So there's plenty of information to get you through your internal audit requirements. Improvement is about objectives, setting your objectives, typically annually. Non-conformance corrective actions. 5Y. 5Y is divided up into a basic 5Y or a detailed 5Y. And you can print these out either way depending on the needs that you have or what your customer's expectations are. You can either do just the left side or you do both left and right side. It's your choice depending on what your needs are. If you don't like 5Y, then there's an 8D. And of course, each one of these has help available. On the right side here are the reports that would come out. Preventive action, yes, I know that's no longer used, but some of the legacy customers of mine are still using preventive action, and there's nothing that says you can't do it. It's really replaced by risk, but it's there. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. And then continuous improvement, this is the 10.3 requirements, and here you are just detailing out the plans and actions for new improvement activities. So I know that was very brief, but I'm trying to give you an overview of the database. There are some helpful things here. There's links to the requirements of the AS9100 standard. If you are looking at a particular area of the standard, but you don't know where it is in the database, then you can find it and click on it, and the link will take you to the right place. There's information about how the database is set up and various revisions. Here in the help section, there's an area you can send suggestions to me, the links button, and the listing of all the help buttons included. So again, thank you for your time and thank you for your interest. Please have a look at the website, www.advancedquality.com. Thank you very much.